It is at 8 a.m. on the Pacific time zone in Washington, and that means only one thing could be possible. It is time for another episode of Hawkblogger Mornings. Everybody, your daily morning fix for Seahawks talk every single day, 7 days a week for now 114 straight days. And we are counting down the days. Oh my goodness, counting down the days until the Seahawks start training camp. If my math is right, and it often is not, to be very honest, if my math is right, we are talking about just 8 days until we get to go watch the Seahawks in the first day of training camp next week on Wednesday, the 24th. So things are going to start getting real. Looking forward to it. I'm sure all of you are as well. I gotta say, it's been a long, winding trip to have these shows during what is a very dead part of the year for football and for Seahawks information. But I think we've learned a lot together over this time. At least I have. Hopefully, if you've been tuning in, you've learned a thing or two as well. And I hope today will be no different. Plan for today is to go over 53-man roster projections, but with a little bit of an eye on what Mike Macdonald has done in Baltimore. So if you tuned into an earlier Hawkblogger Morning episode a few months back, I already done a 53-man roster projection. That was largely based off of players and who I thought made the most sense. It was also based off of some of the historical averages of what the Seahawks have kept at those positions. But that's pretty flawed, right? This is a totally new regime. Now, the general manager is the same, but when it comes down to what positions you keep, what numbers you keep at those positions, that's largely a coaching call. GMs are usually responsible for setting the menu. The head coach generally gets control over ordering from that menu. Now, I'm sure there are some moments where there's back and forth in the personnel department saying, I really think this guy, it would be a mistake to let him go, or I don't think this guy's good enough, you should let him go instead. But the typical way it works in the NFL is the coach gets the ultimate say. So with that in mind, I thought it would make some sense to look back at what Mike Macdonald's done in Baltimore the last couple of years while he was the defensive coordinator. And then we'll take that information, we'll overlay that on the Seahawks roster and the projection that I did back a couple months ago. I think it was May. And we'll see if that affects any players in particular. I think it might. I do think it might. So let's go ahead and do that. Before we get into it, please give the show a like and click subscribe. We've been growing really, really quickly. It's great to have such a great community out there. And I really appreciate it when you guys do it. So take a moment, click like, click subscribe, and also consider joining the channel if you haven't. And if I haven't already said it, good morning to everybody out there. I hope you're all having a great Tuesday. It's going to be a scorcher here in Seattle, as it's been for now a few weeks. All right. So when I was looking at this, let me pull up the Ravens over the last few years. There was a couple things that stuck out to me about what Mike Macdonald did in each year. So first, I'll go through the numbers. We're going to only be looking at defense. Obviously, Mike Macdonald did not, I don't think he had his say on who the offense kept. So we're going to limit it to the defense. Want to welcome Deli, who's joining for his first stream watching the show. Welcome, Deli. Good to see you here, man. So in 2022, the Ravens only kept 23 players on defense. So again, usually I wouldn't say it's typical, but the most common is that you get 25 players on offense, 25 players on defense, and 3 specialists for your 53-man roster. So when you keep less players on defense so that you can keep more players on offense, especially usually like it maybe is one more, but to actually go 2 down to 23 players, interesting to see that in 2022. 2022, he kept 5 defensive linemen, and I'll list these guys out because you'll know the names, but these are generally like interior, either defensive end or defensive or nose tackle in a 3-4. So Calais Campbell, Michael Pierce, Justin Madubuike, Travis Jones, and Broderick Washington. So he kept 5 in 2023. Excuse me, he kept 5 in 2022. In 2023, he only kept 4. So he kept essentially the same 4 other than Calais Campbell was not on the roster. So Michael Pierce, Justin Madubuike, Broderick Washington, Travis Jones. This was a little different than I expected. And when we get into looking at the Seahawks roster projections, I think it makes things a little interesting. We'll see. 5 or 4 is a different number than I had. And I think it has ripple effects on the rest of the roster. So that's one of the big differences. Defensive line. And again, we're not talking about edge, outside linebackers. We're talking about defensive line. Another comment here. Zach Jennings says, rookies report tomorrow. Things are happening. It's true. Let's all cross our fingers, our toes, our eyes, whatever you can to make sure that everybody reports back healthy, ready to contribute this year and in a great state of mind. I know a few guys are coming back married, including our first round pick, Byron Murphy. Congratulations to him again on getting tying the knot. Well, actually, I think he might have just proposed. I don't know if they actually got married yet. So a little different. All right. So then that was defensive line. That's a big one. Inside linebacker, before we get to edge players. Inside linebacker. In 2022, Mike Macdonald kept 5 inside linebackers, which was kind of shocking to me. That's a big number. I expected when they largely play a 2 inside linebacker spot, that you'd be looking at 4 at most, and maybe even 3. But he kept 5 in 2022. Patrick Queen, Josh Bynes, Malik Harrison, Josh Ross, and Christian Welch. Now, this was the beginning of the 2022 season. They did not have Roquan Smith yet. I said Wolf because I'm looking out my window and I'm seeing a coyote walk right toward me. Yeah, so that was inside linebacker, 5 guys. When it got to 2023, guess what? 5 guys. Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, Malik Harrison, Trenton Simpson, and Delshon Phillips. Now, you might remember Malik Harrison. That was a name of one of the guys that I had on my list of possible inside linebackers the Seahawks could target via trade, depending on how things go through training camp. Because we'll see what happens with the Baltimore side, but I think it's unlikely. But Malik Harrison's a pretty good player and a guy that's just rotational for them. But again, 5 inside linebackers both years. That is significantly more. It's at least 1 more and maybe 2 more than I would have expected for the inside linebacker role. For edge or outside linebacker, Macdonald kept 3 in 2022. I mean, that's crazy to me. He only had 3 edge players coming out of 2022. That was Odafe Owe, Justin Houston, and David Ojabo. In 2023, they kept 5. That's more what I would have expected. So they kept Odafe Owe, Ojabo again, Jadeveon Clowney, Tavius Robinson, and Malik Ham. They kept 5 edge last year. I would probably put a little extra weight on what he did last year versus his first year because I'm guessing he had a little more information about what kinds of players he would need during the year, but that can also be personnel specific. All right, so that's outside linebacker, edge. What about cornerback? Cornerback, he kept 6 corners in 2022. Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Kyle Fuller, Brandon Stevens, Jalen Armour Thomas, and Demarion Pepe Williams. So 6 cornerbacks in 2022. He kept 7 in 2023. So he's keeping a pretty long list of corners. By the way, last year it was Marlon Humphrey, Rock Ya-Sin, who's now a 49er, Ronald Darby, Brandon Stevens, Jalen Armour Davis, Arthur Millette, and Pepe Williams again. So quite a few corners. That only left for safety. They kept 4 in both years. In 2022, it was Marcus Williams, Chuck Clark, Kyle Hamilton, and Geno Stone. Last year, it was Marcus Williams, Kyle Hamilton, Geno Stone, and Adarius Washington. So what does that work out to? That works out to an average over those years of 4.5 defensive linemen, 4 outside linebackers, edge players, 5 inside linebackers, 6.5 corners, and 4 safeties. So that's an average of 24 players. You had 23 one year, 25 the next. But here's where this starts to get really kind of interesting. Because if you look at the defensive line, let's just start there. If you look at the defensive line and what I would have thought the Seahawks would keep, I would have expected they keep around 6. And that was maybe just way off. And here's what, and I'm not going to include Draymond Jones as a defensive lineman. He kind of fits both, and so he's a little bit of confusing between edge. They're training him to be an outside linebacker that can play inside. But let's just take him out of the defensive line numbers for a second. If we're really looking at base defensive ends and nose tackles, you've got Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, Jaron Reed. That's 3. And then Jonathan Hankins seems like a pretty good bet for your 4 at nose tackle. And then you've got Mike Morris. That would give you 5. And he's never kept 5, or at least he's been there 2 years. Well, that's true. He did keep 5 in his first season. So it's possible. But if he kept 5, then Mike Morris is in. And that's all dependent on Draymond Jones not counting as a defensive lineman. But that would mean Cameron Young is out. That would mean Matt Goetell is out, Miles Adams, and so forth. And so I think there's a bigger battle on this roster brewing on the defensive line than we might realize. I'm not certain that Cameron Young has a spot on this team. That would be a surprise, but it wouldn't be shocking. Maybe he becomes a practice squad player. I don't think there'd be a huge line out the door for signing Cameron Young if he hit the streets. Mike Morris, I'd be very uncomfortable with him not making it. I really am hopeful that he can be an impactful player for this team. He is coming off an injury. He has talked about trying to get his confidence back. Let's hope he has a great training camp and forces his way to make sure he's on the roster. But there's now a question, because if they go with 4 defensive linemen like Mike Macdonald did last year, I think almost certainly that's going to be Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, Jaron Reed, and Jonathan Hankins. And I'd be kind of beside myself if Mike Morris doesn't make this team. I'm really looking forward to watching him play this year. But with these numbers, it's a legitimate question whether or not Mike Morris is above the line or on the line heading into training camp. So that's one thing that I think I've learned looking at these numbers. Inside linebacker, I would have guessed 4, at most. He's kept 5 both years. If that's the case, then like Jerome Baker, Tyrell Dodson, locks. Tyrese Knight, I think essentially a lock, most likely. And then you've got this John Radigan and Patrick O'Connell have been taking first team snaps. So they seem to be above Drake Thomas in the depth chart. I don't know if Drake Thomas might have been injured and that might have affected whether he was out there or not. I honestly don't remember for OTAs and minicamp. But if they do keep 5, which I'm just going to say it anyway. So inside linebackers, they keep 5. Baker, Dodson, Tyrese Knight, John Radigan, and Patrick O'Connell are the odds-on favorite to be those 5 players. Drake Thomas, Easton Gibbs, maybe they sneak on, maybe they push someone else off. But here's the thing that I really don't like about that. I mean, are the Seahawks a better team if they have Patrick O'Connell on the roster or they have Mike Morris on the roster? Like, if it comes down to that kind of choice, I mean, I certainly I don't like hate Patrick O'Connell. I think he's a fine linebacker, fine backup linebacker, but I don't think he's got much of a ceiling beyond that. So I really am uncomfortable with that 5 inside linebacker number. Then we look at edge, and edge, he kept 3 his first year. Can you imagine if he kept 3? Okay, let's just play that game for a second. If he only kept 3 edge players, they would be Uchenna Nwosu, Boye Mafe, and Draymond Jones. Because I didn't count Draymond as a defensive lineman. I'm counting him as an edge. That would mean Derek Hall doesn't make the team. That would mean Daryl Taylor doesn't make the team. Nelson Caesar doesn't make the team. I mean, it would be an eye opener if this team's second round pick last year, Derek Hall, gets cut in his second season. So I don't think 3. I can't see any way that they just keep 3. Maybe they keep 4. Last year, Mike Macdonald kept 5. So he went from 3 to 5. If they kept 5, then we're talking about Nwosu, Mafe, Derek Hall, Draymond Jones, and Daryl Taylor are the most likely. Although I still think Nelson Caesar is a dark horse undrafted free agent to watch heading into camp who could figure into that last spot. Daryl Taylor, he's on his final year. This is his put up or shut up season. And if the team sees enough from Nelson Caesar where they think he is going to be able to contribute as much or more and be under an undrafted rookie free agent contract for the next 4 seasons, while Daryl Taylor getting cut would save the team $3 million in cap space, Taylor's got to earn his spot this year. And I think that's a good thing for everybody. But if they only keep 4, which is plausible, then Daryl Taylor or Derek Hall are going to be on the outside looking in. Can you imagine if they kept Daryl Taylor and they cut Derek Hall? I mean, I'm no huge Derek Hall fan. I didn't like the pick at the time. I was not a big fan when I saw him during training camp, and he did almost nothing during the season. So I'm not attached to Derek Hall, but when you spend a second round pick on a player that front office said they had a first round grade on last season, you'd like to at least give him another year to see if he could find any return on that massive investment that they placed there. I see Corey Coleman says, I think Miles Adams is out. Yeah, you might have heard I kind of didn't talk a lot about Miles Adams in that list because as much as I like Miles Adams is undersized and he is not a good run defender. And the number one thing that Mike Macdonald's looking for in his defensive line, his ends and his nose tackles, are that they are solid run defenders. He needs them to really hold up because they're going to do a lot of light boxes. They're going to put a lot of people in coverage, and they need that defensive line to be incredibly stout against the run. That's why he's got so many 340-pound plus nose tackles on his roster. So Miles Adams just doesn't fit. I mean, he's a good pass rushing rotational dude. That doesn't seem to be the 280, 290 kind of guy is not the guy that they typically keep. But we'll see. We'll see. All right. Next. So that was edge. Cornerback, I had them keeping 6. He has kept 6 one year, 7 another year. Now, if they keep 7, then it makes it a little easier on the cuts at this position because they've got a pile here. Right now, the locks, I think, for that cornerback position are Devin Witherspoon, Reek Woolen, Trey Brown, Mike Jackson. I think those guys are locks to make the team. I think Artie Burns has a pretty darn good shot to make it. He's been a very good player for them. He can play inside and out. He's reliable. He's cheap. But they do have the 2 rookies, DJ James and Nehemiah Pritchett. And we heard nothing about those guys during training camp, which is not necessarily the best sign. But, sorry, not training camp, OTAs and minicamp. But if you counted along with me there, I named 7 players. That doesn't include Lance Boykin, doesn't include Andrew Whitaker, some guys that they feel pretty good about. But if you want both rookies to make it, you're going to have to keep 7 unless you cut Artie Burns. If they go with 6, then one of the rookies or Burns doesn't make it. Or one of the things I've been talking about for a while here is, do they trade from a position of strength in the cornerback room to get more depth at another position, particularly inside linebacker? And so maybe they trade one of their rookies if they don't feel like they're going to make the roster. Maybe they trade Artie Burns if they don't think he's going to make the roster. Maybe they trade Mike Jackson. I think all those things are possible. But this is going to be a pretty hotly contested competition in training camp between the rookies and Artie Burns, just up and down the depth chart, figuring out who can play inside. DJ James, Burns, and Witherspoon are the guys that typically would be slotted in there as inside players, as slot corners. And then we'll just see. I mean, I think DJ James and Nehemiah Pritchett, if they do not make the team, are, likely practice squad options. And keep in mind, these are not first round picks, second round picks, third round picks, fourth round picks. These guys are 6th round picks, 5th round picks, who often don't make rosters. So even though I think we're all excited to see what these guys can do, I don't think we should assume either one of them makes the team. I personally am a little higher on DJ James. Nehemiah Pritchett, I think, has some really interesting tools. I think he's a little stiffer and not as good about making plays on the football. I feel like DJ James is a little bit more of a playmaker. And I like that he can play inside. So we'll see. I think that's another position where we'll see. And the numbers for Mike Macdonald, I don't think change my calculus that much. The fact that he has kept 7 corners is a little bit interesting to me and not something I would have guessed. So um, that could mean everybody's safe. You could keep all 7 of those guys. Safety, he has kept 4 each year. And if he keeps 4 again, I think Julian Love, Rayshawn Jenkins, Kayvon Wallace are your locks. And then you've got, I think, one of the most fascinating, least discussed, least understood, legitimate battles going on for that 4th safety spot. This is all assuming that Jarek Reed is going to be on the physically unable to perform, the PUP list, miss training camp, and go into the regular season on the PUP list. If Jarek Reed reports and is practicing, then this gets even more heated. But I'm assuming they're going to be able to defer the Jarek Reed part of this based off his injury situation, recovering from last year. Now, beyond Kayvon Wallace, you've got 3 guys. Any of these guys, I think, could make the roster. Everyone's going to tell you Kobe Bryant, because that's the name fans know. It's the name media knows. He's the guy that's played the most snaps for them already. And so Kobe Bryant will be the odds-on favorite from a general perspective. As of going into camp, and this might look crazy once we get there, I have Jonathan Sutherland above Kobe Bryant. I think Jonathan Sutherland is a potentially real sleeper safety player, safety at the safety position, who's also a fantastic special teams player. And I think he brings physicality. I think he is a playmaker. I would really watch out for Sutherland. The other guy, Ty Okada, is another one who I've seen less of, but what I've seen has been quite good. And I think he has a better reputation inside that building than fans or media understand. So I think Jonathan Sutherland and Ty Okada have a legitimate chance of being that 4th safety. Kobe Bryant's probably the odds-on favorite, but watch out there. And if, like I said, if Jarek Reed's in there as well, there's going to be one way or another, there's going to be more than one good player cut from the safety position for the Seahawks. Definitely practice squad candidates, but those are some of those guys that could get picked up, and you might laugh, oh, whatever, who wants the Seahawks cut safeties? Well, last season it happened that that the Seahawks had a safety plucked off their roster, and he's still with the Arizona Cardinals. You might remember Joey Blount. He was, to me, very similar to Jonathan Sutherland. And so he's on the Cardinals roster, and I think is expected to make the team this year. So if we kind of put it all together, if we just follow, let's do this. Let's do a couple passes through the roster. If Mike Macdonald keeps the same numbers he kept last year for Baltimore, we'll do 1 pass of his last year numbers, 1 pass of his averages, okay, over the 2 years. If he just did last year, he would keep 4 defensive linemen. So you're talking Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, Jaron Reed, and Jonathan Hankins. Okay? No Mike Morris, no Cam Young, no Matt Gotel, no Miles Adams. I'm counting Draymond Jones as an edge player, so that's why I'm not naming him. 4 players on defensive line would be Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, Jaron Reed, and Mike Morris. On inside linebacker, he kept 5. That would be Jerome Baker, Tyrell Dodson, Tyrese Knight, probably John Radigan and Patrick O'Connell, maybe Drake Thomas, but probably John Radigan and Patrick O'Connell. He kept 5 edge players. That would be Uchenna Nwosu, Boye Mafe, Derek Hall, Draymond Jones, and probably Daryl Taylor, maybe Nelson Caesar. He kept 7 corners. Devin Witherspoon would be one of them. Reek Woolen, Trey Brown, Mike Jackson, Artie Burns, GJ James, and Nehemiah Pritchett. He kept 4 safeties. That would be Julian Love, Rayshawn Jenkins, Kayvon Wallace. I am going to say Jonathan Sutherland. Could definitely be either Kobe Bryant, Ty Okada. All right. So that's if he did what he did last year. That would mean Mike Morris is cut. Cam Young is cut. Nelson Caesar is cut. Maybe Daryl Taylor, depending on who wins that. It means that all the rookie cornerbacks, the drafted rookie cornerbacks, make the team. Artie Burns makes the team. It would mean potentially Kobe Bryant is cut. All right. Of all those, you could hear it in my voice and see it in my face. The idea of cutting Mike Morris makes me very, very uncomfortable, especially for some of the names we're talking about at the back end of that roster. You'd rather have Nehemiah Pritchett or DJ James than Mike Morris. You'd rather have Daryl Taylor on the last year of his deal versus Mike Morris. Maybe you'd rather have John Radigan and Patrick O'Connell than Mike Morris. I wouldn't. So that's if he does last year's numbers. If we do his average, it would be 4.5 defensive linemen. So we can snag that extra defensive lineman. So let's say then it would be Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, Jaron Reed, Jonathan Hankins, and Mike Morris. Okay. I'm cozy with 5. I can handle 5. You'll see. So that would be if he did 5. It would still be 5 inside linebackers. So the same guys, no change there. Baker, Dodson, Knight, Radigan, O'Connell. It would be on the edge. It would be 4 if we did the average, which means Uchenna Nwosu, Boye Mafe, Draymond Jones, and then either Derek Hall or Daryl Taylor. I'm actually okay with that more than I am with the defensive line decisions we were talking about, because Derek Hall versus Daryl Taylor, I almost want them to feel like only one of them makes it, because we need a lot more out of both of those guys. We need Derek Hall to show that he can do anything well. We need Daryl Taylor to show that he can defend the run well enough to actually be able to be on the field and hopefully be a more effective pass rusher. I think his pass rush skills have not been what I would have wanted. So that's if they kept 4, you're saying goodbye to either Derek Hall or Daryl Taylor. I kind of like that. Cornerbacks, his average has been 6.5. So in this case, since I kept 5 defensive linemen, I'd have to go down to 6 corners. And let me make sure I'm doing my math right there. We went up on defensive line, and we could, it depends. If we let's just go down for the sake of conversation to 6. That would be Witherspoon, Woolen, Brown, Jackson, probably Burns, and one of the rookies, which I'm also fine with. Safeties 4 both ways. So, I mean, between the two, I actually like the average between his 2 seasons better than what he kept last year. Keeping an extra defensive lineman, cutting an extra edge player, cutting an extra cornerback. And he honestly has some wiggle room, because if he went 4 edge and 6 corners, then you're still talking about a 23-man keep on defense. So you could definitely add one of those, that you like back into the mix. I would guess it would be an extra edge player, but who knows? So folks, that's a walk through what we've seen from Mike Macdonald, what he's kept at those positions. What would you want to do? What like, of those things that I was running through, what made you feel a little uncomfortable? Let me know. While you're thinking about it, I want to welcome Wash Farm. So glad to have you as a YouTube member. Man, I get so fired up when people join as a YouTube member. The link is in the description of the video. Would love to get people joining as a YouTube member. It really helps grow the channel, helps people find each other. It puts this little emblem next to your name, highlights your name. So anytime you're making a comment in chat or on the channel itself, I'm aware. I try to do my best to answer questions and respond to comments. And we'll do some, depending on what level you join at, club level, suite level, we'll do some in-person stuff this year. We'll have some fun. So if we're just getting going on the membership, now is a great time. The people that have been members the longest are going to get the most benefits and the most attention for sure. So sooner you join, the better. Now, just before the day before rookie mini camp, the day before rookies report to training camp is a great time to join. So thank you, Wash Farm. And I almost called you Wash Fam. And why not, man? You're part of the fam now. Jeffrey Four, speaking of members, another great member says, cutting Derek Hall would send a message to the team similar to early in the PC era. Yeah, it's an interesting comment, Jeffrey, because if you remember what happened in Pete Carroll's first year, there were some cuts that might have been surprising to people. And I'm going back to pull open that roster because, I mean, Lendale White was a guy that they had traded for and people thought was going to make the team. He didn't. Lofa Tutupu. This was a guy that ended up making the team that year, but did not play the following. It was cut the following season. So, those are two USC. Well, no, there's one USC guy. Apologies there. And one of the things that you kind of heard from, and yeah, he did go to USC. Sorry, I was like, wait a second. I thought he went to USC. I know he went to another college as well. That's what threw me for a second. So Pete Carroll wasn't afraid to come in and say goodbye to players that had been there for a while or who had clear links to him as a coach. That could be a Mike Morris thing. Like that would be the equivalent. Mike Morris is a guy that he coached at Michigan. And if he's not the right guy for his defense or doesn't think as highly of him as I hope he does, then Morris could be on that list. But yeah, I think that I wouldn't get too attached. I think Daryl Taylor is on that bubble for sure. I don't know if Derek Hall would be a real message, though. Cutting a second round pick, that would not only be a message within the locker room, it would be a message like that he'd have to work out with John Schneider because it wasn't only Pete Carroll who picked the guy. So that would be an interesting one for sure. Thanks for the comment, Jeffrey. Corey Coleman says, I think we keep 4 edges. I kind of like it. I think it puts pressure on the right places. Corey also says we might trade Daryl Taylor as well. We could. I mean, certainly pass rushers are valuable. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at where Daryl Taylor ranks in sacks, just in sacks. It's I realize an imperfect number. He has played 3 seasons for the Seahawks since 2021. He was drafted in 2020, but that's a little misleading because he didn't play his full year. So let's look over the last 3 seasons. We're going to sort by sacks. We'll look at this a couple different ways. This is always surprising, I think, to people when I'm able to pull up some of his numbers and where he ranks, because he's a guy that I think most Seahawks fans are not a fan of. Do not like. So let me put defensive end, outside linebacker, defensive lineman. We'll see how this goes. And we're going to say from the 2021 season to the 2023 season. Let's see where he ranks in that time period. This doesn't seem correct. Oh, that's because combined seasons. I was like, there's no way 22 and a half is the largest total over 3 seasons. So let's find out over 3 years. Oh my goodness. Sometimes, guys, I've been trying to talk to Pro Football, well, Pro Football Reference about their product. It has gone to absolute crap. It will not save your searches properly, and so you have to reset it every time yourself. It is so annoying, especially for a product that I pay for. So let me try to do this one more time. Hopefully I've got it properly set up this time. No, I don't want fantasy points. I don't care about fantasy points. Okay. All right. So over the last 3 seasons, Myles Garrett, no surprise, has the most sacks with 46 in the NFL. Now, where is Daryl Taylor? They don't show. Is it because they don't? Okay, 6.5. What? What is going on here? This is not returning the proper numbers. Forget it. Forget it. So annoying. Let me try one more time because I am stubborn. All right, let me see if I can find Daryl Taylor. Okay, now this seems more accurate. I think they categorize him as different positions, whatever. So again, TJ Watt actually has the most sacks with 47 since 2021. Daryl Taylor ranks 33rd in the NFL. That doesn't sound great. He has 21 and a half sacks over that time. It's more than Jadeveon Clowney, who had 20 and a half. It is more than Justin Madubuike, who had 20 and a half. It's more than Sam Hubbard from Cincinnati, who had 20. It's more than Joey Bosa, who had 19 and a half. Yes, he's injured, but yeah, that's kind of the thing about being available. It's more than Robert Quinn. That seems they only have 2 years of him. It's more than Bradley Chubb, who had 19, more than Kyle Van Noy, more than Shaquille Barrett, more than Von Miller. There's a lot of guys that Daryl Taylor has more sacks than over the last 3 seasons. And if we do a little bit more here and we say a biographical filter and we look at year drafted, year of player's career. So if we say this is within the first 4 years, because technically it is the fourth year of his career last year, even though he only played 3. So we'll look at other players from his draft class. Oh, that doesn't really help me as much as I was hoping. If I just do 4th year, from 4th year to 4th year, maybe that will work. Hopefully that will work. No. So what I was looking for there is players that were in his draft class, how many sacks they had. Um, in any event, I don't know. I don't think these guys were all drafted the same that year, but Daryl Taylor has like almost the same number of sacks in that period of time as anybody in his draft class. Let me pull open the 2020 NFL draft and we'll look at the types of the actual positions drafted, or actually let's look at, sorry, I'm going down a rabbit hole on Daryl Taylor. I know people probably don't care as much. I do. I want to, there we go. Look at some of the names of the guys that were drafted. Chase Young. He's definitely outsacked Chase Young. He has outsacked Javon Kinlaw for sure. He's outsacked Chason from the Jaguars. Let's look at round 2 here. He's outsacked Yeturgros Matos. I mean, he's essentially been the most productive pass rusher. AJ Epinesa, where is he on this list? No, he only has 14 and a half sacks. Taylor has 21 and a half, so they were drafted the same year. Who else? Josh Uche. Uche had one good season. He has 17 and a half, so he's a little bit closer, but still behind. Let's look a couple more rounds in, and then I'll give this up. But I'm enjoying kind of figuring out. Definitely did better than Julian Akwara. He has more sacks than Matabuike, who was drafted in 3rd round that year. This is a pretty good draft, by the way. I'm a lot of good players in this list. Jonathan Greenard. What about Jonathan Greenard? Jonathan Greenard does have more sacks than Daryl Taylor. He has 22. So a half a sack more than Daryl Taylor. He might be the actual leader for most sacks. Alex Highsmith, he's pretty darn good. Where does he fit in this list? Highsmith. Oh, let's search for him. Am I missing him? Oh, Alex Highsmith. Sorry. He's right at the top. That's why he has 27 and a half sacks. So he is the number one guy from that draft class. Man, what a great pick by the Steelers at 102 in the 3rd round. Guy was out of Charlotte. It was a comp pick, by the way. So that's for Jeff Simmons, if you're listening. I know you think comp picks never turn into anything, but a 3rd round comp pick turned into Alex Highsmith. And he has been a very, very good player for the Steelers. 27 and a half sacks through his time. I will say that the advantage that Greenard and Highsmith have is they've played all 4 seasons. Daryl Taylor, he did that 21 and a half sacks, 3rd most in his draft class, even though he's played one less season than all of them. So as much as I believe Daryl Taylor absolutely needs to play significantly better, the numbers from a sack perspective are impressive, and they are going to matter to people. If you show the average GM what I just looked up and they look at their pass rush, there's going to be some interest. I'm going to do another show another time on the actual impact we've seen from Mike Macdonald on the edge rushers that he and other positions as well that he adopted. And, who knows if he has that kind of effect on Daryl Taylor. It wasn't that long ago people thought Daryl Taylor was a legitimate threat for 13 to 15 sacks, that was not crazy for him. Feels crazy right now. He was not. I don't think he was an effective pass rusher last year, and I don't think he was an effective run defender. So if he does not make this roster, it would not shock me. But I agree with the notion that the Seahawks would most likely try to get something in exchange for him, not just straight cut him. But I think that's a possibility. All right. Before I get going here, a couple other notes from our YouTube members. Peter Jacobson, keep Mike Morris. Might have to keep a bunch of linebackers just because of the amount of unknowns in that group. Man, that's a dangerous game to play. Basically, what you're saying there is we have a crappy position, so let's keep more crappy players and hope that they can reduce the crappiness. I know that's not what you're saying, but that's the trap you can fall into as a GM and say, ooh, we got a thin spot. We should keep some extra guys just in case. Generally, what it means is if you have a thin spot, that your backups don't belong on the roster and they wouldn't make other rosters, and that you need to add from the outside. I think that's more my thought in those situations as opposed to let's keep more mediocre players. That for me is almost never the answer. I do acknowledge, though, Peter, that is a perspective that leaks into the brains of certain coaches and personnel people. So you're not wrong to think it. I think it would be wrong to do it. Jeffrey 4 says, keeping a fifth linebacker makes me uneasy with the player you cut to make room for them. Do you think the new kickoff rules influences the numbers they keep? It absolutely will. And I don't think we know yet where. We heard from Jay Harbaugh about some of the positions that he thinks would potentially be impacted. I think he's talking about keeping more edge players. We heard Jay Harbaugh talk about that edge players can be more effective on this, that you can keep more linebackers or even defensive linemen because they might be more effective in this new kickoff situation. So that is a wild card that we cannot predict yet. And I'll have a better idea once I get my eyes on who's on the special teams depth chart in training camp and who's playing on special teams. Okay, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Please give the show a like and subscribe to the channel. We are starting to gain momentum as the season gets closer and closer. Training camp starts to begin. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger. This has been the 114th episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.